The warning signs are everywhere. As we approach a pivotal election, our nation is more divided than ever. Meanwhile, the Israel-Hamas war pulls us closer to another global conflict, threatening to destabilize the world economy and our own security. Consumer debt is at an all-time high, and with the lowest affordability index in decades, millions of Americans are barely scraping by. We're facing surging immigration, crime rates on the rise, and a cost-of-living crisis that's pushing even the middle class into financial ruin. In this video, I'll break down some of what the World Economic Forum's 18th edition of the Global Risks report included. It has confirmed how our failing economy, crumbling ecosystems, and fractured global alliances are leading us toward disaster. These are not distant fears. This is happening now, and it's happening fast. But we still have a chance to act, to prepare, and to protect what's left before it's too late. The apocalypse isn't just a possibility. It's our future if we don't wake up. This is the warning you can't afford to ignore. Chapter 1. The Cost of Living Crisis. A nation on the brink, America, is facing an unprecedented cost of living crisis, and it's tearing apart the very fabric of society. Homelessness has skyrocketed, as more and more people are priced out of housing, many forced to live on the streets or in temporary shelters. This isn't just a problem for the unemployed or the underprivileged. The middle class is being squeezed as well. Credit card debt has ballooned, with millions of Americans relying on high-interest loans just to make ends meet. The average family is cutting back on essentials, from groceries to medical care, just to survive. Renting, once a refuge for those who couldn't afford to buy, has become nearly impossible for many. Rental prices have surged, and even cheap rentals are now controlled by algorithms like Zillow's, denying housing to anyone with a poor credit score. And those credit scores? Many have been damaged over the past 4 years as people struggled to keep up with inflation and rising costs, pushing them further into a cycle of debt and instability. The Global Risks report makes it clear. The cost of living crisis is the most severe risk we face in the next 2 years. But the forecast doesn't improve from there. Over the next decade, we're staring down a future dominated by environmental and societal crises, driven by these very economic trends. With inflation unchecked, families torn apart, and credit ratings shattered, our society is heading for collapse. Chapter 2. The Erosion of Social Cohesion. A nation divided. As the cost of living spirals out of control, we're witnessing the erosion of social cohesion like never before. People are on edge, grappling with financial insecurity that leaves no room for compassion or understanding. The polarization of social media, driven by echo chambers and divisive propaganda, is fueling anger and distrust. Once united communities are splintering, as differences are amplified and the battle for resources intensifies. Social media, once a tool for connection, has become a battlefield where ideological divides are magnified and manipulated. Extremist viewpoints are fed by algorithms pushing people further apart. This polarization not only drives political and social unrest, but creates an environment ripe for disinformation and propaganda. With so many people struggling financially, they are vulnerable to manipulation and willing to do more for less, pushing themselves deeper into a cycle of poverty and disenfranchisement. Propaganda plays a key role here. By distorting reality and inflaming tensions, it blinds people to solutions and pits them against one another, weakening the very foundation of society. The Global Risks report by the WEF highlights that this social polarization is exacerbated by a lack of trust in governments, media, and institutions. As resources become scarcer, tensions rise, and people are more likely to turn against one another. Limited resources, from food to housing, push people to compete in ways that further degrade societal bonds. Individuals, struggling to keep their heads above water, are more likely to take on low-paying jobs or make concessions that set them back even further, reinforcing a vicious cycle of economic instability. This fracturing is not just contained to the US. The report warns of a sharp rise in cybercrime, with digital vulnerabilities exploited by bad actors seeking to deepen these divisions. Misinformation spreads like wildfire, further eroding trust and cohesion in an already tense environment. At the same time, large-scale involuntary migration is on the rise, as people flee from areas ravaged by conflict, economic collapse, or environmental disasters. These migration waves strain borders and social services, heightening tensions between local populations and newcomers, fueling fear and amplifying hatred of people who are perceived as being foreign or different from oneself, often based on their nationality, ethnicity, race, or religion. In this context of widespread fear and insecurity, crime is also on the rise. As more people are pushed to their limits, communities are breaking down, and law enforcement struggles to maintain order. It's not just theft or violence. Cybercrime is increasingly targeting vulnerable individuals and institutions, draining resources and undermining efforts to stabilize the economy. The erosion of social cohesion represents a ticking time bomb, one that threatens to dismantle the social fabric of nations. The combination of economic despair, rising crime, polarization, and misinformation is creating a society where fear and desperation dominate, and people are willing to sacrifice more than ever before, often without realizing the cost. This chapter of decline is not inevitable, but without immediate action to bridge divides, rebuild trust, and provide stability, we risk plunging even further into chaos. Chapter 3. The escalating intensity of natural disasters. A growing threat and rising speculation. The world is experiencing an alarming rise in the frequency and intensity of natural disasters. From catastrophic wildfires and devastating floods to record-breaking heat waves, these events are no longer rare occurrences. They're becoming the new normal. While climate change has been identified as a major driver of these disasters, public speculation is increasingly pointing to other factors, including weather manipulation and government neglect. There is growing suspicion among some that chemtrails, the trails left by planes that appear to linger in the sky, could be part of a weather manipulation effort. These concerns are amplified by a lack of transparency surrounding geoengineering programs, which aim to modify the atmosphere to counteract climate change. Whether these trails are actually affecting weather patterns or not, the fear of manipulation has caught the public's imagination, particularly in light of increasingly erratic weather events. While science points to natural causes, such as rising global temperatures and shifts in atmospheric currents, the speculation around chemtrails continues to fuel debates about the true causes of these weather anomalies. In parallel to concerns about weather manipulation, wildfires have grown more intense and destructive, especially in regions like the western United States. The WEF's Global Risks report highlights how the combination of poor land management and climate-induced dry conditions has created a tinderbox scenario. Government and government-subsidized properties, many of which have neglected maintenance, are particularly vulnerable to these fires. Failing infrastructure, such as aging power lines, has been responsible for some of the most destructive wildfires in recent memory. In some cases, these lines, owned by public utilities, have sparked fires that devastated entire communities, leaving people questioning whether their own government is doing enough to protect them. Adding fuel to the fire, both literally and metaphorically, is public speculation about the use of military-grade weapons in some of these disasters. Some claim that direct energy weapons, DW, which use focused energy beams to ignite fires or disable infrastructure, have been tested or deployed in certain areas. While there is little verified evidence to support this theory, the increasing severity and peculiarity of these fires, sometimes burning homes while leaving trees untouched, has led some to believe that there could be more at play. Whether or not DWs are a factor, the fear and suspicion surrounding their potential use is eroding trust in official explanations and amplifying the belief that governments may be involved in weather manipulation or disaster-triggering activities. The Global Risks report warns that these rising natural disasters will only continue to escalate over the next decade, driven primarily by environmental degradation and climate change. But as these disasters become more frequent, so too will the speculation and distrust surrounding their causes. The combination of failing infrastructure, government negligence, and the persistent rumor of DW weapons or chemtrail manipulation is creating an atmosphere of unease and fear, making it harder for the public to discern the truth. Whether we are facing the consequences of climate change, poor government management, or more nefarious activities, one thing is clear: natural disasters are becoming more devastating, and we are unprepared. These events are not just destroying property. They are eroding the trust between citizens and their governments, fueling conspiracy theories, and leaving entire communities in a state of vulnerability. Chapter 4. The dark reality of chemical manipulation. Our food making us sick A's. The world grapples with a wave of mental health deterioration. Questions are being raised about the possible role of chemicals in our food. Over the past few decades, we've seen alarming increases in obesity rates, infectious diseases, rising suicide rates, and a disturbing uptick in school shootings. While many point to societal pressures and economic struggles as contributing factors, some speculate that this rapid decline in both physical and mental health could be linked to something more sinister: intentional chemical manipulation in our food supply. Many people are beginning to suspect that the surge in mental illness is not purely coincidental. The theory that chemicals deliberately added to our food are designed to cause long-term health issues, from mental disorders to physical diseases, is gaining traction. The prevalence of highly processed foods, packed with preservatives, artificial additives, and questionable ingredients, has led some to wonder if these substances are not just harmful by accident, but by design. Could there be a concerted effort to weaken public health, mentally and physically? The alarming increase in obesity rates is not just a result of poor lifestyle choices. Many point to the ubiquity of processed, chemical-laden foods that dominate our grocery stores, with harmful ingredients designed to be addictive and damaging over time. The obesity epidemic is not only linked to physical health problems like diabetes and heart disease, but has been closely tied to mental health disorders, creating a vicious cycle of deteriorating well-being. As these issues escalate, they also put a strain on the healthcare system, driving the demand for medications and treatments, a boom for the pharmaceutical industrial complex. Speaking of pharmaceuticals, the overprescription of medications, from antidepressants and antipsychotics to opioids and painkillers, has skyrocketed. Some believe this is no coincidence, suggesting that the same system that's polluting our food is pushing prescriptions in order to profit from our suffering. The pharmaceutical industry, often criticized for prioritizing profits over patients, stands to gain significantly from a population dependent on medication. As mental and physical health continues to spiral downward, the demand for drugs increases, further fueling this complex. This deterioration in health is having devastating effects on our society. The suicide rates have reached shocking levels, with more people feeling hopeless and overwhelmed by their circumstances. These factors mentioned are suspected to have links to the cocktail of chemicals in food and the over-medication of the population. Many of the individuals involved in these tragic events have been reported to have histories of prescription drug use, raising questions about the mental stability and emotional side effects of these medications. Is it possible that the pharmaceutical industry is profiting from our collective suffering, pushing medications without fully understanding or revealing their long-term consequences? This is confirmed by the World Economic Forum's 18th edition Global Risks report, highlighting the severe mental health deterioration, which is now seen as a global crisis. The report mentions the rise of infectious diseases, obesity, and societal breakdowns, symptoms of a population that is sick, mentally and physically. Many speculate that these trends are no accident, pointing to an intentional implementation of chemicals in our environment, including our food, as part of a broader effort to control populations and keep them dependent on drugs and healthcare services. The convergence of processed foods, mental illness, and the overprescription of medications paints a disturbing picture. Whether or not these chemicals are intentionally designed to cause harm, the effects are clear. Mental health deterioration is worsening at an alarming rate, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate the natural from the engineered. As we face an epidemic of mental illness, obesity, infectious diseases, and violence, we must ask ourselves, who stands to benefit from this? And what can we do to take back control of our health? Now is the time to rethink what we consume, question the medications we're prescribed, and challenge the industries that profit from our suffering. If we don't, we risk losing more than just our health. We risk losing our minds. The future depends on our ability to recognize the toxicity in our food and medicine, and to demand better for ourselves and future generations. Chapter 5. The War of Media. Propaganda, misinformation, and a nation on the edge. In today's world, we are constantly bombarded by media warfare, a relentless stream of propaganda, misinformation, and malinformation designed to manipulate, divide, and confuse. As the lines blur between fact and fiction, society is reaching a boiling point. People are becoming increasingly aware of the tactics used by governments, corporations, and special interest groups to sway public opinion. But this growing awareness is leading to more frustration, anger, and division. One of the most contentious issues in recent years is the 2020 U.S. election, which many still believe was marked by irregularities. The election results, particularly the overnight shifts in key battleground states, have left a lasting impact on the American psyche. Millions of Americans remain deeply skeptical, pointing to what they believe were nefarious activities that occurred while most people were asleep, further fueling distrust in the electoral process. These suspicions are exacerbated by the mainstream media's insistence that the election was conducted fairly, despite the persistent sense among many that what they see in the polls doesn't align with the on-the-street consensus they hear from family, friends, and neighbors. Adding to the tension are rumors circulating about millions of people being brought in from other countries under agreements that would ensure their votes are directed a certain way. Some speculate that these new arrivals may not even be the ones casting the votes, but rather that others are voting on their behalf, further undermining faith in the system. While these claims have yet to be proven, the very existence of such rumors is tearing at the social fabric, feeding into a broader narrative of election interference and manipulation. The Global Risks report highlights the dangers of misinformation and disinformation, which are increasingly being weaponized to sow discord and erode trust in institutions. As citizens become more aware of these tactics, they are also growing more cynical, questioning every piece of information they receive and turning away from traditional media sources. This, in turn, fuels alternative narratives, many of which are driven by conspiracy theories or political agendas. The result is a fractured society where truth is subjective and trust is in short supply. This media warfare is not just a battle for ratings or ad revenue. It's a battle for the hearts and minds of the public. With social media algorithms pushing divisive content and traditional media outlets doubling down on partisan reporting, the American public is left in a state of constant tension, unsure who or what to believe. The ability to shape perception has become a powerful weapon, and those who control the narrative wield immense influence over the direction of the country. As a result, the polarization of America is reaching a critical point. Friends and families are divided, political discourse is toxic, and social cohesion continues to erode. People feel increasingly alienated from their government and each other, making it harder to find common ground. The media's role in amplifying these divisions cannot be overstated, and until the manipulation of information is addressed, the country will remain at odds with itself. We are living in a time when propaganda and manipulation are at the forefront of shaping public opinion. The ongoing war of information has left many disillusioned, questioning not only the integrity of elections, but the very foundation of truth. If we continue down this path, where every news outlet has an agenda and every piece of information is subject to doubt, we risk reaching a point of no return. The stakes are high, and the consequences of inaction could be catastrophic. It is up to us to seek out the truth, question the narratives that divide us, and demand accountability from those who would use media warfare to destabilize society. Prepare now. One event away from collapse, the warning signs are all around us. We are one major event away from a total state collapse, and when it happens, it won't be governments or institutions that people turn to. It will be their own strength, resources, and preparedness. To protect yourself and your family in these uncertain times, it's crucial to accumulate security measures now. Start by securing your home and property with motion detectors, high-quality locks, and surveillance systems. Make sure you have the tools and generators necessary to maintain basic utilities when infrastructure inevitably falters. More importantly, develop essential skills and knowledge to defend yourself and your loved ones when law and order break down. The time has also come to fully understand and be ready to exercise your Second Amendment rights. In a world where resources become scarce, where food, water, and fuel are fought over, we could see a society where regular people are forced to delete one another for basic goods. The collapse of trust, the rise of desperation, and the crumbling of social cohesion will leave many with no choice but to fight for survival. It's coming, and sooner than you think. The fragile system we rely on is already crumbling beneath our feet. The moment of collapse is near, when food, water, and safety will no longer be guaranteed. In the chaos that follows, your neighbors will become strangers, and desperation will turn ordinary people into threats. The security you once took for granted will vanish overnight, and survival will be your only focus. The signs are clear. We are on the edge of a societal breakdown where the strong will take what they need, and the unprepared will fall. Get ready, because when it hits, there will be no going back. Please share this video before it's too late.